Morning everyone, welcome to this Advanced Steel webinar where we're going to be looking at diagnosing and resolving numbering issues. My name is Rob Merriman, I'm an application engineer at Graitec UK. If you've not met me before, that's what I look like. So I've got 11 years of experience in the construction industry. When I finished university, I started off as a draftsman using advanced steel, mainly with a focus on architectural metalwork, and then I moved on to structural steelwork. And then for the last 3 years, I've been working as an application engineer for Graitec UK. So we do training, technical support, implementation and customization for structural CAD packages, mainly focused on advanced steel, but with advanced steel being added to the AEC collection, we now look at all different types of software that can help you in the collection. So a little bit about Graitec before we crack on with today's webinar. So we are a global company with 550 staff. 355 of those are technical, so we are a technical driven company. Headquarters is in France, and we operate in 11 countries worldwide with over 48 offices. We are a healthy, growing company, and we are now becoming one of the largest Autodesk partners worldwide. Like I said, we've got over 550 staff, and we're technically driven, and we have 100 staff who are located in our R&D center in Romania. So those guys are producing things like the Power Pack and advanced design, and we're here to help you guys out. So we work on thousands of projects with our customers. We have a 98% excellent or good for all of our technical support, and that's over 50,000 support cases per year. And at the moment, we're delivering 3,500 courses per year. So why Graitec? We break ourselves down into 4 key areas. So Graitec Create, so using Autodesk products with the Graitec Power Packs to enhance those Autodesk products. We have Graitec Simulate, so to take those created designs and make sure they work for the real world. So that's with products such as Advanced Design or Advanced Design Connection. Then we look at the Fabricate side of things, taking your design intent through to the finished product and managing everything on site. And then sitting on top of all of that is Graitec Manage. So that's looking after all of the other 3 areas, all of your work in progress data and your drawings, so that we can work with a common data environment. So Create, we're looking at products like Advanced Steel, Revit, AutoCAD, InfoWorks. Simulate is Advanced Design, ArchiWizard, Advanced Design Connection. Fabricate, Armor Plus, Advanced Workshop, again Advanced Steel falls into that category. And then Manage is Graitec OpenTree and or Autodesk BIM 360. So as a company, we can cover all areas of your project from start to finish. The Power Pack. So the Power Pack in this webinar, there is a handout. So if you've not used the Power Pack before, if you've not seen it, there is a flyer to run through what is included in the Power Pack, how it works. If in the UK at least, if you're a maintained customer, part of your package will include the Power Pack. So if you don't have it installed, you don't have it running properly, please reach out to us and we'll get it installed and running properly for you. I didn't check right at the beginning. I'm assuming everyone can see me and hear me okay. I haven't seen anything pop up, but if someone could just confirm. Okay, thanks, David. So if you have missed any of our webinars before, or you want to go back over this webinar, all of our content is now in our Advanced Steel content portal. So that's on our graitec.co.uk website. Every webinar that we as a team have done over the last 4 years, you can watch on demand on that site. And we also have our Advanced Steel blog. So myself and Alec try and do at least 1 blog every month. So if you do subscribe, you won't miss any new blogs. So upcoming webinars. At 2 o'clock today, I'm doing a webinar on working with special parts. Then a couple of weeks time, Alec is doing a webinar on best practices for drawings in Advanced Steel and then creating a model template for Advanced Steel. For all future webinars and events, again, we've got a link to our events page. If you follow us on LinkedIn, we'll also let you know when we're releasing the next batch of webinars. So today, we're going to look at why we get numbering issues, numbering after changes have been made to the model, checking for duplicate part numbers and resolving the issues there, figuring out the differences between two parts and assemblies, why we're getting differences, and then finally we'll look at why my prefixes or our prefixes could be incorrect. This is just going to be an overview. We're not going to have time. It's not a live sort of surgery for everyone, so we're not going to have time to go into individual issues, but hopefully all the stuff I'm covering today will resolve any numbering issues that you're having with Advanced Steel. So we'll look at why do we get numbering issues. So there are a couple of key points. Some people number the model too soon. So if you number the model and then make loads of changes, you're going to have to renumber the model. And if you don't, then you will get problems. Manually creating numbers, you should never ever manually type numbers into the system because the system hasn't had the opportunity to decide what's the same and what's different. And then making changes after the numbering has been run. Now, in an ideal world, you'd get your project, you'd get all your drawings, you'd have no RFIs, you'd get all the connections, you'd model everything, you'd number it, you'd run the drawings, it would be fabricated and it would be installed. In the real world, we know that's not the case. So we know that you have to make changes after the numbering's been run, but you do need to follow the procedure correctly, and then you'll get the correct output from the system. So if you do have to make changes to the model, you must run the numbering again for the system to figure out what is the same and now what is different. Running the numbering on the model after the changes have been made will only change the numbers for the items that have been modified. So a lot of people get concerned that it will completely renumber the model. It won't do that. It will only change what you have modified in the model. If you are concerned, take a copy, save the model, close it down, take a copy of it, take a copy of the model MDF file and the model folder. Then you've got a backup of everything before you start the numbering process. When you rerun the numbering, the system in the dialog box will tell you what has changed and you can export that for reference. So we're just going to go into showing you that and running through those bits and pieces. Okay, so we're going to make a couple of changes to the model. I'm just going to show you the sort of basics of changing. Sorry, just give me a second. I seem to have an issue with the audio there. Just give me a second. Okay, so we'll just try that again. Just give me a second. Okay, so we're going to make a couple of changes to this model and we're just going to show you the sort of basics of changing. So I've got all my drawings run here, everything's ready and being issued for approval, everything's got a revision on it. So what I'm going to do, we're just going to before we start, we'll just show you what we're going to do and why the system's going to do it. So if we look at the assemblies and we look at column 1, you can see that column 1, there are 4 of them. It's made up of F7, which is the base plate, and M4, which is the shaft. So what I'm going to do, someone's come back after we've issued this, and they want some timber web holes in one of these columns. So we're going to put our UCS onto the web. We'll flip to holes. Got some holes in there, so we'll do 1 in the Y and 10 in the X at 450 centres. We'll up it to 12. So we now have one column needs to be different. So this is where we have to run the numbering dialog again. If we don't, the system still at the moment thinks that all those are the same. So before we do that, if you're uncomfortable about it, what we can do is just close the model down before we do anything. We'll go to the folder, which is my model. So that is my model. Should be an MDF file in here as well. So you should take the model, the MDF file when it's there, and the model folder, and we'll just put those in a folder called backup. So if it's not doing what you think it should be doing, you've got the model that you can go back to and then look at the numbering again. So now we have a backup. We'll run our numbering dialog. It's set up from how I had it set before. So we just let the system decide what it needs to do. And then in here we now have the old part mark and the part mark column. So as we scroll down, we can now see that this item in here was C1, but it's now C7 because C7 is the next item, next C available in the list. And if we go, so that is the assemblies. If we go to the single parts, we'll see again that the old part mark there was M4, but it's now M20. So if you want this for reference, you can export this dialog as a text file. So if we go back to our folder structure, we can see the text file. So this is the numbering that took place at this time. So you do have a reference for what it's doing in here. So that has exported the single parts. We would then go to the assemblies and we'll export that. So we've got single parts and main parts. Probably recommend that you put the date on here and then you've got the numbering change. Now what we want to do next, we can close that dialog down. We want to sort out the drawings that already existed. So if we have a look, I've now got needs update in label, so C1 and M4. Now I'm going to select the update in label and I'm going to use the update revision. So I'm going to leave it on next available index. I'm just going to put revised as clouded. That will open the drawing in the background, add a new revision, cloud any changes that need to be made, and it will do it all for us. We don't have to do it manually step by step. So if we have a look at the drawing, we've got the preview. It will cloud that those are now 3 not 4. Now, what the system won't do for me is it won't run a new drawing. So I'm going to go back to my processes and I'm going to use the all assemblies. Now, on my system, I have duplicate drawings turned off. So what this will do is any drawing that it finds that exists already, it will show in this dialog saying these are already created. But if we have a look in the command line, you can see that it's now run the C7. And I will also do the same for the parts. So all those parts existed. So that's what I would do for making changes, or if changes have been made to the model, the steps that you should really be going through to make sure that you haven't missed any drawings, the system's deciphered the numbers properly. And then you've got, if we go into the document manager, we can then see that we've got C7, which is just one number, and C1 has been clouded in here to show that the quantity is 3 number, not 4 number. Okay, so that is the basics for if you have made a change in the model, what you should run through to get to sort your numbering out. Now we're going to look at checking the model for duplicate items. So duplicate items are items which have the same number, but they are different. So something has changed in the model, so the actual objects are different. The system then classes these as duplicated items. You need to fix your duplicate items because your quantities in your drawings and even the content of the drawings and your bills of materials will be incorrect. You can have duplicate assembly or single part numbers, so you do need to check both. Now, one of the numbering on the output tab, one of the tools we have is a toggle to switch between assembly, single part and preliminary numbers, and then we can use the tools to check the differences between the objects, and we can use the toggle to then go between the assemblies and the single parts and even the preliminary numbers. To find out the differences, the system will might tell you there's a difference in geometry. So we then might need to use the distance command, put some construction lines in, even run a couple of dummy drawings and compare the dimensions on the drawings. So that's your output tab. The toggle is the very left-hand option. You've then got the top option on the right-hand side to check for duplicate part numbers, and then you've got the option on the right at the bottom to do the difference between two parts. So again, got a short little video that will run through the process of actually doing this and some tips and tricks for you. So we're going to now look at duplicate parts, how to find them, how to resolve the issues, how to find discrepancies with the model. So for that, we're going to be working in the output tab. Now, the important thing before using any of the tools really in this part marks panel is everything is controlled by the toggle here. So this switches you between the assembly numbers, the single part numbers and the preliminary numbers. So any of these functions that you use here are driven by the toggle. So at the moment we can see in the toggle that nothing is orange on the little icon. That means we're on the assembly numbers. If we click it, that will go to just the orange beam, and if we look in the command line, it says the switch is now on preliminary. So anything we did would be for preliminary numbers. If we toggle it again, you can see that the end plates are now orange, and that's now single part numbers. So you must use the toggle before you start using these icons. So we're going to start with duplicate part numbers. So to check for duplicate parts is this function here. That's running it for assembly numbers. So I've got some duplicate parts in here. where I've been maybe making changes in the model. I haven't run the numbering again, or someone's come back and made some changes. You made the changes, you've been interrupting, you forgot to do the numbering, you saved and closed the drawing down. You can't have duplicate parts. What this is saying is that there are objects in the model that have the same assembly number in this case, but the objects in the model are actually different. So then our fab drawings will be wrong, our bill of materials will be wrong. It's just a snowball effect from there. You'll get all sorts of problems in your output. If I toggle to single part numbers, I can run that check again. I've got F5, F3, M7 and M1. So we're going to look at, we'll start with rafter 1. Now if you want to find parts that have duplicate numbers, so you can identify objects with duplicate part numbers, all you simply do is type the part number in. It is case sensitive, but what that will do, that will show us all the R1s, and it will highlight to us the 2 bits that we've got problems on. Now for the assembly, it's obvious in here that this item, this rafter here, I've put a contour in for maybe a service hole for a beam, and I haven't renumbered. This item cannot be the same as all these other items. It has to have a different assembly number. So if I delete that and we clear the marking and I run my check, I've still got a duplicated part R1. And now if I run that test, it's this item in here. Now I know, because I've set this up, that there's a problem with one of the plates. So we'll just run a check. I think it's F5, it is. So again, we can search for this. So now what it's done, the system has highlighted all of the F5s, which are these end plates. And you can see in here that this one is red, all the others are blue. So this one is different to the others, but they have the same part number. So how would you go about figuring out what the differences are? You've got this little button in here, differences between 2 objects. Now this is driven again by the toggle. So if I do differences between 2 objects, you click the objects, you can only do 2 objects, but it will pop up and it will say in geometry. So that's either the X, Y, Z dimensions, the positioning of the holes. If you're doing this on assembly drawings, it might tell you that there's differences in the weld, differences in the attached parts. It will give you a hint. It won't always give you the answer that you're looking for. So we'll have to do a little bit of digging to just figure out exactly what the differences are. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put my UCS onto the object, so my X and my Y are on the plate, and I'm just going to use an AutoCAD distance command. So if I have a look at that, in my X it's a 200, in the Y it's 775.37, and the distance between them is 800.75. So because I've got these dimensions shown in my command line, I can compare them. I'll pick the right points. So the distances are the same, so it's not the distances that's causing the problem. So what we're going to do now is possibly the hole positions that's a problem. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to a front view and I'm just going to draw in some construction lines. We know this plate is correct, so we will draw the construction lines from this plate. And then if we really look closely, we can see in there that these holes are slightly off. We could have renumbered the model. This would get a different number, then we could number the changes. But what I've done in there is I've tweaked the holes, so those bottom holes are 0.5 mm different. So what I'm going to do to fix this is I'm not going to go into the joint dialog. I know this joint here is correct and I want this one to match it. So on the extended modeling tab, we've got a transfer properties of joints. Now it works the opposite way to match property. So this is the joint I want to edit, and this is the joint I want to match it to. And now if I check the differences between two parts, in the command line, no difference is found. If we run our duplicate part check, it's no longer F5, so that has corrected that duplicate part. The next bit we're going to look at is how we can find the differences if it's the first time we've done the numbering on the model. So I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit. And what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to delete all the numbering from this model. So when deleting, I always ungroup the identical parts first, and then I delete them. What you have to remember is because my toggle is on single parts, that's only deleted the part numbering. So if we go back into my part numbers will be gone, but my assembly numbers have not. So I need to use the toggle to go to the main part or the assembly numbers, and then I'm going to ungroup and I'm going to delete. So this is if we've not done any numbering now, we've just finished the modeling, we want to start running the numbers on the model. So what we're going to do, we're going to run the numbering, we'll let the system do what it needs to do. Now, when I run the numbering, what I like to do is you get this reporting tool. When you click on the items in here, it will mark in red the item. So you can check that things that you think are the same are actually the same. So we can just run through this list. Now, straight away, I know that this beam and this beam should be the same. So B11 and B13 should be the same and they're different, and also B14 and B15 should be the same. So we need to now figure out why those are different before we start running drawings, before we start producing our list, because the workshop, we don't want to give them 10 different drawings when they could be one drawing with 10 number of that item. So we know initially it's B14 and 15, and B11 and B13. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate these two items first. We're going to see if we can use the model browser to tell us what the differences are. So in the model browser, you can filter it by current model view. Now if we look at the single parts, F10 are the end plates. Now, those are all the same. There's 4 of them there. So it's not the end plate that's different. There's something in the actual shaft that's different. So if we go to our output tab, we'll use our toggle to go to single parts, and we'll use the differences between two objects. So it's telling me in geometry. So what we'll also do is we'll just isolate these two parts in here, and we'll just see if we can figure out what the differences are. So again, we can look in the model browser. Now if we look at the assembly here, we've got B14 and B15. B15 is made up of M7 and 2 F3s, so those are the same. But if I look at B14, that's made up of an F3 and an F15. So that tells me that there's something wrong with this F15. Now, what we could do is we could go back to putting some construction lines in there. We could come back to looking at the geometry in the model. But what I'm actually going to do is, because I've got no drawings run, I'm going to run a couple of temporary drawings. I'm just going to run these 2 drawings just to see, because sometimes it's easier to actually run a quick drawing because I can delete them afterwards. So sometimes it's hard to find the differences. On the previous example, it might have been difficult to actually spot that those holes were slightly off center. But if I'd have run a couple of drawings for them, if I'd have renumbered it and run some drawings, we can show part detail, and that will give us all the dimensions. and it will be easier to see if there are any differences. So we don't always have to go through the document manager to open part drawings. You can simply select the item, right click and choose show part detail. So if we look at the numbers on the ends, we've got 3,101 and 3,101. But I've got 3,101 and 3,100, and it's these dimensions here, the 92. So it is that end plate. Just another little tip in here: if you're excuse me, if you're looking for differences between the objects and you can't spot any, you can actually change the dimension style in here. If you use the change dimension style through the parametric dimensions, and we go in and modify our current dimension style, we can change it to 2 decimal places. That will actually update all of the dimensions in drawing to show you 2 decimal places. So you can do it on the fly for a particular drawing. So it's M15 and it's the holes in here. And again, I have just been messing with the bolt centers. So it is this connection in here. Horizontal bolts, I set those centers at 92. So that's why I'm getting different parts. Please never manually come in here and override this number. What we're going to do, because I've run drawings and I'm going to renumber the model, and these are dummy drawings anyway, this one does want to update because I've now changed the dimensions. So I'm just going to delete those drawings. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to number the model again. That will then tell me that the beams used to be B13 and now B11, and my B14 is now B15, and there's 2 of them. So there are plenty of different ways of finding the differences between the models. The toggle is the key to all of this, whether you're working on single part or assembly numbers. And then you can use the tools from within there, but they're all driven by that toggle. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at are why do we get incorrect prefixes when we're numbering. So prefixes in advanced steel are driven by the model roll. I'm looking at this from a UK and a GBR build. When you're numbering, the system has to assign the main part of an assembly, and the main part model roll is what drives the assembly prefix. You can override this to set your own main part of the assembly, and that can be done with the little button there, which is mark set main part of assembly. So again, just got a little video running through what the system does, how we can override it, and how we can set the main part of the assembly ourselves to get the correct prefixes. The last part of this webinar is going to be looking at why the prefixes are not as we expect them to be. So if I run the numbering on this model, again, I just out of force of habit, I go through the model and I just have a quick look at what the system thinks are the same, what they think are different, have a look at these part marks. Just going to have a look in here. These 2 items down here are being called PL2 and PL3. Now those should be columns. If we have a look at the model roll here is column. So ideally I want these to be called columns to help my workshop. So it actually runs a column drawing to help my site team. So they actually put it in with all the other columns. Now the reason for this, if we look at the properties of this box section, the weight of this box section is only 2.91 kilos because it's 150 by 100 by 5. So it's not a very heavy item. But if we have a look at the assembly weight of this whole object, the assembly weight is 64 64.18. The reason for that is we've got a 30mm base plate on here. Now, when we let the system run the numbering on the model itself, but without us doing anything to the model, what the system does is the system has to assign a main part of an assembly. Now, if it hasn't been set by us, the users, what the system does is it picks the heaviest object of the assembly and it makes that the main part of the assembly. Now, we can check that on the Output tab. We've got this item in here, Mark Main Part of Assembly. So if I look at one of the rafters, whatever goes blue is the main part of the assembly. So on the rafter, it is that rafter section. If I do that on our column, you'll see that the base plate goes blue because it's the heaviest object in that assembly. Now, what that does is that gives me the wrong prefix. It calls it a PL because that's a plate drawing. But when I come to run my fabrication drawings, what it's also going to do is it's going to run that on a plate drawing style. So it's not going to run it on a column drawing. So again, in this scenario, I haven't run any drawings yet. There are no drawings linked to my model. So I want to correct this before I run the drawing. And we want to override the main part of the assembly to something that we're doing. So if I do create main part of assembly, that will actually take out the assembly number. I need to do it for both columns. So that's me manually setting the main part of the assembly. Now when I run the numbering, it doesn't look for the heaviest object in these two assemblies. It uses what I've told it to use, and now you can see the assemblies are C6 and C7. So I've manually done that. That can be done before you run the numbering, and it's usually used if you're doing sort of big welded frames and you want one item to be the main part of the assembly so it triggers the right drawing, etc. You can set that beforehand, and that will give you a correct drawing and a correct prefix. And these are the things you want to be looking to set and you want to be checking before you then start running all your drawings. Okay, so that takes us to the end of today's webinar. Just the last little slide. We as Graitec are here to help you with your advanced steel. So we do have our sort of 5 steps. The beginning is basic training. Step 2 is technology implementation, where myself or Alec would come to you guys and actually set the advanced steel up to match all your CAD standards. We can run, and we do run, training courses on customizing the drawing output, and any custom training, no matter how experienced you are with advanced steel. We can then go on to database management training and then batch file implementation, so you can put your advanced steel settings onto a network to deploy to everyone. So in the handout you have all of our contact details. And if you do have any questions, now would be the time to ask them. I saw a couple pop up. So how do you turn off duplicate drawing production? If you open management tools and go to the defaults and you use the filter to search for duplicate, you've got the option in management tools to then to turn off duplicate drawings, and then the system wouldn't let you turn off duplicate drawings. So I will let the webinar run for a couple more minutes. If anyone does have any questions, please type them into the box. If not, hopefully we'll see you on this afternoon's webinar, where we're going to be looking at special parts in advanced steel. Connor, so your question where you're talking about having not to have marking, is that etching or is that actually the numbering? It might be one where that might be a question that you need to send me an email with a model and some drawings so I can actually have a look at what you want to achieve there. Okay, Connor, I can see the questions popping up. I think I'm going to have to see a model and probably even see what settings you've got on your machine. So if you want to email me a model and drawings, point me in the, tell me what the mark number is, then I can have a look at what your system is doing, and then I can try and suggest any solutions from there. If anyone else does have any questions, if you want to pop them in now, otherwise I will finish this webinar and hopefully we will see you this afternoon. A recording of this webinar, Carmen, will go up onto our Advanced Steel Content Center in the next week or so. So our Graitec Advanced Steel Content portal has all of our webinars up there. It'll just take the guys in the office a few days, even up to a week, to process all the webinars we've done and then upload them to the content portal. Okay, I'm going to end it there. Thank you very much for attending, and hopefully we'll see you this afternoon for the special part webinar.